heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood stood a house with a chilling reputation, a house whispered about in hushed tones with a dark history shrouded in mystery. It was known as the Dollhouse of Death, a name earned not just for its eerie appearance, but for the spine-tingling tales that surrounded it. This house wasn't just abandoned. It was forsaken, left to decay as if time itself had forgotten it. But within its crumbling walls lay secrets that would haunt the bravest souls who dared to explore its depths. Legend had it that the Dollhouse of Death was once home to a family torn apart by tragedy. Whispers of a gruesome murder echoed through the corridors, the kind of horror story that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. But it wasn't just the tragic demise of the family that made this house infamous. It was what happened afterward that truly chilled the blood. After the family's untimely end, the house remained untouched for years, a silent sentinel in the neighborhood. But then, one by one, strange occurrences began to plague the area. Residents reported hearing eerie whispers in the dead of night, their dreams haunted by the specter of the house itself. And then there were the dolls, the countless dolls that seemed to multiply within the house's decaying walls. Each doll was more sinister than the last, with eyes that seemed to follow you wherever you went and smiles that twisted into grotesque grins when no one was looking. Some claimed they could hear the dolls whispering to each other, their voices filled with malice and hunger. And then there were the disappearances, people who ventured too close to the house, never to be seen again. But despite the warnings and the legends, there were always those brave enough or foolish enough to seek out the truth behind the Dollhouse of Death. Among them was a group of friends drawn together by their shared fascination with the macabre. They had heard the stories, seen the warnings, but their curiosity outweighed their fear. On a moonless night, they gathered outside the house, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they approached the crumbling facade, a chill swept through the air, sending goosebumps prickling across their skin. But still, they pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay within. The door creaked open on rusty hinges, revealing a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the light. With trembling hands, they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The air was thick with dust and decay, the smell of rot clinging to every surface. As they explored the house, they felt the weight of its history pressing down on them, the whispers of the past growing louder with each step. And then, they found it, the Dollhouse of Death, hidden away in a forgotten corner of the attic. The dolls stared back at them with vacant eyes, their porcelain faces frozen in expressions of eternal torment. But as they reached out to touch them, they felt a presence lurking in the shadows, something ancient and malevolent stirring within the darkness. With a sudden sense of dread, they realized they were not alone in the house, that whatever had claimed the family all those years ago still lingered within its walls, waiting for unsuspecting victims to wander into its grasp. In a panic, they tried to flee, but the house seemed to twist and contort around them, its corridors shifting like a labyrinth designed to ensnare its prey. And then, just as they thought they would never escape, they found themselves back at the entrance, the door swinging open to reveal the safety of the outside world. But as they stumbled into the night, they knew they had been changed forever by their encounter with the Dollhouse of Death. For in its depths, they had glimpsed the true face of terror, a darkness that would haunt their nightmares for the rest of their days. And though they had escaped with their lives, they would never forget the price they had paid for their curiosity. The night air was thick with tension as the group stumbled out of the cursed house, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Each step away from the Dollhouse of Death felt like a victory, but the terror they had experienced lingered like a heavy fog, suffocating and unrelenting. As they gathered outside, their faces pale and their hands trembling, they exchanged haunted glances, silently acknowledging the horror they had witnessed. But even as they tried to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to them like a second skin, they knew that the nightmare was far from over. For in the darkness beyond the house, they could feel the presence of something watching them, something ancient and hungry that hungered for their souls. It was as if the Dollhouse of Death itself had become sentient, its twisted heart pulsating with malice and cruelty. With a sense of urgency born of pure terror, they fled into the night, their footsteps echoing through the empty streets. But no matter how fast they ran or how far they traveled, they could not escape the feeling that they were being pursued, that the darkness itself was closing in around them, ready to consume them whole. As they raced through the deserted streets, their hearts pounding in their chests, they could hear the sound of laughter echoing in the distance, a cruel and mocking sound that sent shivers down their spines. It was the laughter of the dolls, the laughter of the damned, a sound that promised nothing but pain and suffering. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, its tendrils reaching out to ensnare them in its grasp. And then, just when they thought they could run no further, they stumbled upon a sight that froze them in their tracks. Standing before them was the Dollhouse of Death, its crumbling facade bathed in the sickly glow of the moonlight. But this was no ordinary house. This was a nightmare made flesh, a twisted reflection of their deepest fears and darkest desires. With a sense of horror unlike anything they had ever known, they realized that they had never truly escaped the Dollhouse of Death, that it had been waiting for them all along, biding its time until they were ripe for the taking. And as the darkness closed in around them, swallowing them whole, they knew that they would never be free of its grasp, that they would spend eternity trapped within its walls, tormented by the dolls that lurked within, forever prisoners of the Dollhouse of Death. The group found themselves trapped in a nightmare, unable to discern reality from the twisted fantasies the Dollhouse of Death projected. Each step they took seemed to lead them deeper into the abyss, the house morphing and shifting around them like a living, breathing entity. Desperation clawed at their minds as they searched for an escape, but the corridors stretched endlessly, leading them in circles, mocking their futile attempts at freedom. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering sinister secrets and luring them further into the darkness. Time lost all meaning as they wandered through the labyrinthine halls, their sanity slipping away with each passing moment. Faces appeared in the windows, twisted and contorted in agony, their silent screams echoing through the empty rooms. And then, just when they thought they could bear no more, they stumbled upon a room bathed in an eerie light. At its center stood a single doll, pristine and untouched amidst the chaos that surrounded it. Its eyes seemed to pierce through their souls, drawing them closer with an irresistible pull. Unable to resist, they approached the doll, their movements sluggish and robotic. It whispered promises of salvation, of release from the nightmare that held them captive. But as they reached out to touch it, the doll's facade shattered, revealing the grotesque horror that lay beneath. With a deafening shriek, the house erupted into chaos, its walls closing in around them with bone-crushing force. They screamed in terror, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of madness that surrounded them. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the nightmare ended. The group found themselves lying on the cold ground outside the Dollhouse of Death, their bodies battered and bruised, but alive. As they struggled to their feet, they realized that the house was gone, vanished without a trace as if it had never existed. But the memories of their ordeal would haunt them for the rest of their days, a reminder of the true terror that lurked in the darkness. And though they would try to forget, to move on with their lives, they knew deep down that they would never be free of the Dollhouse of Death, that its twisted legacy would live on, forever etched into their minds and souls. With trembling hands and hearts heavy with dread, the group made their way back home, each step a struggle against the memories that threatened to consume them. They vowed never to speak of their harrowing experience, knowing that no one would believe the horrors they had witnessed. But as they lay in bed that night, haunted by nightmares of porcelain faces and echoing screams, they realized that the Dollhouse of Death would never truly release its hold on them. It would linger in the shadows, a specter of terror that would follow them wherever they went. And so, they lived out their days in a perpetual state of fear, always looking over their shoulders, always wondering when the darkness would return to claim them once more. For in the end, they knew that some nightmares never truly end. They simply wait, biding their time until they can strike again. As for the Dollhouse of Death, it remained a legend, a cautionary tale whispered in the darkness to warn those foolish enough to seek out its secrets. But for those who had experienced its horrors firsthand, it was a nightmare that would haunt them until the end of their days. And so, the Dollhouse of Death faded into obscurity, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and decay, its legacy forever intertwined with the souls it had claimed. And though the world moved on, oblivious to the horrors that lay hidden in the shadows, there were those who would never forget, the ones who had tasted the true terror of the Dollhouse of